Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest in my series of Substack Lives with other writers over 50. It's amazing how many of us there are on Substack, and it's wonderful. And today I am delighted to have Jay from Wild Lionesses Pride. And for those who don't know me, I'm Wendy Gordon. My Substack is Changing Lives. It's about mental and spiritual health. And spirituality in general, mental health in general, pretty much everything in life affects our mental health. And I believe that everything is spiritual as well. It doesn't matter if you're an atheist or any other faith or no faith. We're all can have spiritual experiences anytime, any place. And so those are the kinds of things I talk about. And Jay, I will invite you to share more about yourself and your Substack.
Actually, my name is Jay Siegmann and I'm residing in Germany. And I have two Substacks I'm currently very frequently posting to. The one is Wild Lionesses Pride, where I mostly share essays about trauma and deeper thinking of and deeper meaning to life. Sometimes I do as well something like receipts or fun things, whatever it is. But in the other one, White Lionesses Lookout, I share mostly poetry, and currently there is the Pride on the Page creative challenge running on that Substack, where we have prompt each day. Today it was devotion, and I shared a poem with the community that has gathered there, and it is my creative part.
I love that you have two different ones. One that addresses very serious topics and is longer essays, and another creative one that may be a possibility I want to explore as well. And
Yeah.
for those who haven't checked out both of Jay's Substacks, I have, and in fact, I've contributed to some of the Pride on the Page prompts, and they're wonderful. So I encourage you to check them out. And if you're not inclined to post anything yourself, that's fine. You can also use
Yeah.
them as journal prompts, or you can just read what others share and be inspired by that. And Jay's essays on the Wild Lionesses Pride Substack are fantastic, and I enjoy reading
Kudos.
them very much, and I've enjoyed getting to know Jay. We are also both part of Elizabeth Gilbert's Letters from Love community, and that's another place of great inspiration and encouragement and support.
Absolutely. And we are both very, very, desolate that Glennon Doyle decided to only using Substack for a short period of time. We both would have loved her to open her community to Substack as well, but I respect her
Yes, I totally
decision.
understand why she left, and it broke my heart to see how she was treated when she arrived. And the 2 days that I was in her community on Substack were fantastic, and there were so many wonderful people. And the chat during her live with Elizabeth
Yeah.
Gilbert was wonderful as well.
Yeah,
But
I agree.
life goes on, and we can certainly find Glennon in other places. And of course, as you know, because you're in it, I'm currently doing a book club discussion of Glennon Doyle's We Can Do Hard Things book,
Yep.
which just came out in May, that she co-wrote with her partner Abby and sister Amanda. And that's a very powerful, inspirational book as well. Although
Yeah.
our book
It's the
club
year of the
discussions are
powerful
just
books.
wide ranging and not necessarily about the book. So even if you don't have the book or haven't had time to read it, you're still welcome to join our live Zoom gatherings. The next one is this Sunday. And if you go to the chat tab on my page, you'll see that the chat thread with the link to join us on Zoom for that. But Jay and I both write about traumatic experiences and mental health. And post-traumatic growth, coping strategies we've developed, insights we've gained from life, and learning to embrace our authentic selves and free ourselves from some boxes that others put us in and that we used to think we had to stay in.
Yeah, that's actually some part where Glennon's book also is very, very strong. I was really astonished about that because she addressed it very, very clearly. The belief systems and the systemic structures that do affect us in so profound ways and so disturbing ways, I have to say today. And yeah, at the moment, it's affecting me quite a lot. These structures we are part of and who always try to push you in one direction or in another direction. And that is not always in agreement with your own body and your own beliefs and your own healing, actually.
I agree 100%. Another book that really helped me was Dr. Gabor Mate's The Myth of Normal, which is, it's a much longer book and includes some, like case studies and stuff to back it up and research. But yeah, the whole point of it is how toxic our cultural values are and how deeply ingrained they are. And so it's so hard to break free of them. Even if we consciously reject those beliefs, we still have to live in a society that celebrates them and, requires us to earn enough money to survive. And most people are comfortable. I see in the chat, normal is boring anyway. I 100% agree. Conformity is overrated. In fact, I created a nature and nurture ebook that combines my nature photographs with short little inspirational quotes.
Oh.
And one of them is that why follow the crowd if you don't want to go where they're headed? Conformity is overrated. And it has a picture of a sawtoothed shark that's a very unique animal. But anyway, so it's so hard to stand out from the crowd. And I learned a couple of years ago that I'm neurodivergent. And as I explored that and learned more about ADHD, so many things about my life made sense that I just saw as, character defects, or I was lazy, or I was a procrastinator and all this stuff. So it's been very liberating to understand that better. And it also, helped me recover from a severe depression. And so many things about our society make our mental health so much worse. And yet society turns around and blames the individual for having those problems and treats it as an illness instead of a symptom of what's wrong with our culture.
Yeah, and then they go and ask you to dissociate in order to function again in the system that caused the illness in the first place.
Yes, absolutely.
Because that's the triangle I'm currently about to embark on. I have been on medical leave since January 24. And it took me about 9 months to be able again to drive more than half an hour car in one stretch. I couldn't do it. I wasn't mentally, cognitively able to drive a car for longer than 15 minutes. And now my health insurance, as I live in Germany, the system is a little bit different. My health insurance said, okay, now you're about to fall out of the sick payment I still get. And now you have to go to a rehabilitation an occupational medical rehabilitation, and it is a specialized clinic. And that clinic is aiming to get me function again to re-enter the workforce, because I haven't yet reached the time where I can go into my regular pension. And yeah, I'm not sure how long that will last with me in the clinic, because I only started healing because of the pandemic, actually. For me, the pandemic was the best thing that could have happened, especially with the many grief I hold, because my partner just died at the beginning of the pandemic, not from COVID, from something else, but she died on March 6th, 2020. And it was a last funeral hold in our town before that allowed people with it. And afterwards, 2 days afterwards, everything was in lockdown. And that actually fueled my healing, because I was suddenly thrown back on myself and had not the many distractions around me. So I sat there and said, okay, what's now? And that's where it started, because I couldn't simply, for the life of it, couldn't find a goal, a purpose, anything. Nothing. It was empty. Absolutely empty. I not even would have been able to tell you I would like to go to country X or country Z.
I can totally relate to that. I went through a very severe depression, and for more than a year, I not only did I not have a purpose, I did not want to be alive, and I was starting to, explore ways to make that happen. And thankfully, I healed. Ironically, after a year of trying every antidepressant under the sun and other treatments for depression. It wasn't until I found a new mental health provider who suggested that I try an ADHD medication, that medication brought me out of my depression very rapidly. So, it's amazing how life works. Yeah. But
yeah, well,
I can certainly understand it. It's hard to find a purpose. In my case, it was spurred by losing my job right in the midst of the heart of the pandemic.
Yep.
And having to move and multiple losses all at once, basically.
Yeah.
But as you said, the upside is that when you're not working and you don't have the usual distractions, as I started to come out of the depression, that level of desperation and of self-reflection helped me, take the risk of becoming an entrepreneur and writing and speaking about mental health issues and helping other people, see that there is hope and healing.
Yeah. Being kind of a role model for others. Yet, but I have found, especially in Germany, that especially people on long-term health issues, and even more if they have mental health issues, they're like, stop! I don't want this.
Yeah, a lot of fear that somehow it's going to be contagious. Or what do you mean?
They don't want the healing.
They
want to stay in this state where nothing is happening. They are only complaining, and they have this second-rate gain of being ill, because everybody says, "Oh, you're so poor," and "Oh, you poor person." Yeah, well, there are people who actually like that. Yes.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because the first part of it I can totally relate to. When I was severely depressed, I did complain all the time because I truly believed there was no hope, and I was a victim of the people who unjustly forced me out of my job and other social and political realities. But the second part, in the U.S. at least, there's not that kind of compassion for people who are suffering mental illness. At least, maybe with a physical chronic illness, there might be more so, but there's more judgment and blame in the U.S. Like look on the bright side, pick yourself up.
Well,
As if you can magically wish away the depression.
I agree on that, because what I have found actually is that maybe that's unique to Germany. I don't know, but what I have found is that many people have chronic illnesses, and when I have a chronic illness as well, and I have it since 1980, so decades, and I never saw myself as depressed or having an anxiety because I am the person with an over-functioning depression. So I'm not going down, I'm going up, 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 up. And I'm working myself to death. I'm over-functioning, I'm overcompensating, I'm doing everything over, and not under. And I have been in a pain group over winter, and all the people there had pain conditions. It was a psychosomatic group, yes. Nevertheless, every single one of the other participants did not make the connection between their pain and their mental health condition. None. They all looked at them differently, separate. No connection at all. They never made the connection that the migraine they had since 2000 and whatever might be an outcome of their mental health condition.
Mm-hmm.
And suggesting that there might be a connection, they said, "Oh no! I'm not depressed. I'm not anything. I don't have an anxiety." They are all perfectly well citizens, and nobody has a psychic condition. Nobody has a mental health condition. They all have lots of pain. They have many chronic illnesses, especially gastrointestinal illnesses that are always coming from the psyche. Always.
Yep.
I haven't met one person with a severe chronic gastrointestinal illness without at least one or two very, very heavy traumatic experiences in their life. So,
yeah. Well, getting back to our own lives, I know that you have been very vulnerable on Substack on what you've shared about your own struggles, but also about the strength you've gained lately. And you used the metaphor of a canyon. And so say a little bit more about how all that you've been through has helped you heal and embrace your authentic self.
About a year ago, I was very, very down because I was still not getting anywhere. And then my coach told me I should read this book about toxic shame by John Bradshaw. And I read it, and it was like, oh, that's me. And
I have read that book, Healing the Shame That Binds You, I believe is the title, yes?
Yep. And it was such an eye-opener. And that actually led to finally being able to open myself up more, because I finally had the key to unboxing shame and blame and the scapegoating that was going on. I suddenly got an understanding for it, and that enabled me to come even more into my body and more into centering and into embodiment. And then I read another very eye-opening book that is by Prentice Hempel, What It Takes to Heal. And she actually is also a non-binary person, and she is an embodiment worker. She has been very active in Black Lives Matter. And she has founded the Embodiment Institute, and her book was the first book actually that put the systemic angle of intergenerational and systemic injustice traumatizing into the equation of personal depression, anxiety, and traumatic experiences. I had come over at it from my own systemic coaching, so I wasn't new to it, but it was the first book that actually referenced the long-term trauma and the systemic injustices as another part, another avenue into our trauma system and how it manifests in our bodies. And with that embodiment, I was finally able to get so deep into my body that I could finally say, okay, I'm trying to hold all that. I no longer needed to push away the unwanted emotions and the all this what is so uncomfortable and so unpleasant, and the rage and the shame and the blame and the grief and these feelings of I'm feeling so unsafe. And then I discovered shadow work meditations by Catherine Liggett on Insight Timer. And I did one and I thought, wow. And I did the same one the next day. And that was actually like fireworks, because that meditation brought me back into the moment when I experienced a trauma in my body. And I was finally in that meditation and through that meditation able to validate the little child within me and then go in the same sitting and reparent this little child. It was, I was crying, I was howling, I was drained, sweaty, and I was drained of energy afterwards. But it was such a relief, and that I did that in that summer 12 more times. And I did integrate indeed 12 more heavy traumatic experiences in the span of 4 weeks.
Wow. And did you do this all on your own with the help of that app? Not like with a therapist or?
Not live with a therapist, because all my therapists at that time were in summer holidays. And I did it all on my own and only with the app. Okay, I knew I have my many methods, how otherwise I wouldn't have dared to, but it felt right. And what I encountered afterwards is that I really integrated them, because the reaction, the bodily reaction, I had experienced before when I was triggered, and it was mostly the bodily reaction that then triggered the mental reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Not the mental reaction, the bodily reaction, but the body was already in full gallop, in full force, before the mind catched up and said, okay, here's a problem, here's a problem, here's a problem. No, the body was already and don't come near me. And that vanished. For that trigger, it vanished. It was simply no longer there. And that was kind of, wow, what is happening here?
Amazing.
Because I never thought that these bodily reactions would actually subside. And now I at least to many of those, I not even react anymore. Sometimes I feel a little bit uncomfortable, but that's it. That's simply a moment of uncomfortable that passes, and all good. And from that came more or less this canyon model I have talked several times already about. The canyon was always my metaphor. It dates back to 1988, when I did my first therapy and was confronted with my first probably most heavy traumas, because that was after a suicide attempt. And in this canyon model emerged from my experience last summer at one point, and from all the from the Buddhist perspective, from meditation, that was another entry point, and then my systemic coaching. I have by now about 220, 230 hours of systemic coaching under my belt. I thought, okay, when I think I'm walking in this canyon, and looking at this canyon, what is on the mesa, and what are the side canyons, and what is the climate, and what is the weather? And I actually said, okay, the climate is more like it's like living in a democracy. That would be more like a climate. And Trump is more like a bigger weather system, or more like a season. Not a weather system. He is more like a season. And
or a tornado or a hurricane is what comes to my mind.
He is more like a season, like the monsoon season. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Since it's ongoing. Yes.
The weather are his executive orders. They are the weather. And what is happening in Iran and in Israel, that's the weather, because that's happening now. And then you have people, in my case, my mother, who has, for instance, built a dam in my canyon. She built that, and that dam actually are the belief systems she planted within me, and that are restricting now. As long as the dam is intact, they are restricting the flow of my river and causing the emotions that are suppressed to dam up behind it in a reservoir.
Very powerful imagery.
And the as the emotions are suppressed and suppressed, of course, the water is rising and rising and rising and filling more and more space in the side canyons and back into the river bed. So at the beginning, it was only a small reservoir, but when it's dammed up for 40 years, it's a huge reservoir. And I somehow felt I couldn't destroy this dam, because if I would destroy this dam, everything behind, in front of it, would be, and nothing would have survived. So I needed to find a way to dismantle the dam piece by piece by piece and reduce piece by piece by piece the level of water. And actually these shadow work meditations did exactly that. Each shadow work meditation was aimed at one trauma and one belief system, and dismantled a part of this dam and reduced the water within the dam. And so at one point the pressure from the inside on the dam was so low that you could say, okay, now we can open the rest valves and everything is going to flow out and fine. And then you can just get rid of the residue.
That's
And
wonderful.
that's actually what happened. And that opened up the possibility to, for the first time, really examine all those side canyons that had been underwater. So I could finally look into these side canyons, and for me, each side canyon is representing a trauma. It is a part of me that has been taken away through trauma, and then when I stand there and I looked at these walls, and I was cartographing them, and I was mapping everything, and I was examining, and was like a cartographer and an archaeologist. That's how I felt. And then I said, then I finally found a cave. I said, okay, a cave. Interesting. And so I started to investigate the cave. And I found that I was suddenly inside myself. Then I thought, okay, when I'm now inside myself, then I am the canyon. And that was the actual switch. That I understood at first, it was more like, I am the canyon, the walls, the structure.
Mm-hmm.
Now I am the canyon, I'm all of it. I'm the void and I'm the walls. I'm the whole structure. I'm the air, I'm the hot air, I'm the water, I'm the walls, I'm everything. Only what is above the mesa. That is the system I live in. Like a canyon itself. I mean, no canyon on this earth is simply a canyon standing alone.
Right.
It is always a part of a larger structure of the crust of our earth.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, I am also a part, of course, of this earth, and I'm interconnected with everything else. And that's actually how this canyon model evolved, and was getting more and more detailed and more sophisticated. And for myself, I can explain quite a lot of what is happening by translating it into the model and making it more transparent. Because if you, at least for some people, it's helpful to have an image, and not an image of themselves, but an image that is not related to themselves. Because
Yes.
when we are looking at ourselves, we are mirroring, and this mirroring is not always helpful. So if we are looking at a system like a canyon and say, okay, now let's say this is a canyon, and this is, we say this is your river of life. Yeah, that's carving out this canyon. And you are kind of part of you is this structure. Then you can see, okay, I am part of a larger system. I'm not isolated. And very often, at least I have found very often that I felt a big sense of isolation and non-belonging. And this isolation and non-belonging was detrimental to my healing, because it was always, two steps forward, and then there was this isolation, and I got 3 steps back. Not just 1 step, but 3 steps back. And it was like climb. It was like Sisyphus. I was rolling the ball up the hill, and when I was down again. So
yes, I can relate to that as well. Having all kinds of insight into my issues and how they developed, and the techniques I can use to recenter myself and all of that. And yet, with the healing and the feeling all the feelings and the greater awareness of the surroundings, also comes this sense of, I don't fit in because I don't agree with all of that. I don't want to be part of all of that. And that's actually one of the reasons I started doing these lives and writing on Substack and elsewhere, and why I'm now creating a larger community where we can interact together, that I'll launch in September. But because of that isolation, basically I'm creating the communities that I know I need.
Same.
And therefore other people need them too. And when we come together, we are so much stronger, and we remind each other of what we know to do, and we work together, and we become stronger and greater than the sum of our parts, basically, as a system.
Absolutely, Wendy. Absolutely. I totally agree. And it's the same reason why I started this, because at the same time, I found out that I needed more of English in my life, because the German language is not a language that is helpful for me. The form of German communication is rather harmful in many ways. And so, I started to write in English, and I found that I can write about some things only in English. I cannot write about them in German. It's not possible.
Very interesting.
The words are not coming in German.
Is it that the language doesn't have those words, or that it's too close to you and you're more distant if you write?
It's too traumatic.
Okay.
The language itself was so harmful in my life that that is the part why I'm dreading this occupational rehab in a clinic full of German-speaking people in close proximity. I have neither of that right now. I'm speaking only German to my therapists. And of course, when I go into the supermarket,
right.
That's it. As I have only my brother left, socially wise, I have no reason to speak German as with my therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And when I write, I write in English. When I speak, yeah, I'm doing lives on Substack
Yes.
Live in English.
Are you ultimately hoping to live in another country then?
Yeah. That's the ultimate goal. My life is unraveling still. My company is bankrupt, and the process is currently underway to dissolve it and to resolve whatever is things. I'm no longer in charge. A special in person has been installed by our court system, and then I had taken on quite a big chunk of money for this company on my private account, and because the company is no longer able to pay it, I'm now on this money on my own. And it's so much that I have to sell the house I'm living in. And that is going to unravel in the next probably 6 months. And then I'm going to pack up my things and take 2 suitcases and go wherever my intuition will tell me to go. And it, of course, depends a little bit on how much money this house will bring into my personal account. This house is not mine alone. I'm sharing it with my brother. Yet we have another house next door, and we might dissolve the community of heirs we currently form. And so I might get more proceeds from the selling of this house, and he's getting the other house instead of it.
Okay.
So I'm no longer an owner of that house and get the whole proceeds of this house, which will give me a little bit a higher starting capital. But I'm not sure how much that will be. It can be anything. Right now, I'm expecting anything between a starting capital between 20 and 200,000 euros. And that's quite a big difference.
Yes, that certainly is. Yes. And I think it's so important that you shared that, because in my other lives, I've tried to emphasize all of the ways that our lives are better after 50 than when we were younger. And a lot of that has to do with the inner work that we've done, the shadow work, the healing of our traumas, the getting back in touch with our feelings and caring less about what other people think. And all of that is wonderful and very true. But at the same time, there are costs that come with it. And we don't get to this point without going through a lot of pain first. And even when we have this level of healing, it doesn't magically solve everything. I'm very much struggling financially too, since my career unexpectedly ended. And it is a struggle to pay the rent each month, and that adds to the mental health struggles and emotional stuff. And while I still wouldn't trade this and go back to the false security of a steady paycheck, I just couldn't do that ethically. And it was just bad for me in a lot of ways. But I do think it's important to be honest and transparent about that. With that, yes, there are many benefits to this healing and this awareness and this rejecting of social norms, but there are costs too.
Yeah, well, in my case, actually, the rejecting of social norms is about 80% of my trauma, because I have been gender non-conforming since the age of 3, or more or less 2.5, which dates it back to 1969. And yeah, well, at that time, it was still usual that even in Germany, girls had long hair and boys had short hair. I refused to have long hair. I had long hair for about half a year in my life, up to here. There's one photo of it, one. And I was ostracized in kindergarten because the girls said, "That's a boy. We don't want to play with a boy." And the boy said, "That's a girl. We don't want to play with a girl." And I was sitting there. I would have rather played with the boys. And yeah, well, I was sitting between all chairs because yeah, I am also neurodivergent. I'm not HDS or HDHS. I'm not Asperger, and I'm not autist. I did these tests, but I'm still neurodivergent. Well, probably somebody will at some point find another acronym for it. I think it doesn't matter because I think neurotypical, neurodivergent. Actually, it does not matter. We are humans.
Yes, and it's so subjective. Who gets to decide what is typical or normal?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the other problem, that we separate from each other because we compare, we categorize, we label, we judge, we berate, we rate, we do compare and level and whatever. We are doing everything to put people in boxes and ask people if they are boxed in, if they are happy. Nobody in a box has ever been happy. Nobody. And it's only creating one thing: separation. And that's why for myself, I use them if I have to use them to give a definition of who I am, but I'd rather not use them any longer for myself, because I'm just a person. I'm not even a normal person any longer. I'm just a person, and I'm connected to everybody else, and to my cat, and to the earth I'm sitting on, and to the nature around me. And I'm breathing air that probably has molecules of your air, your outbreath in it, because of the weather systems.
Yes,
Who
and
knows
that's
that?
a very important point too. You mentioned, your trauma from being non-binary, and even though I have always identified as female, and still, that wasn't an issue for me. Nevertheless, traditional gender stereotypical roles of what women are supposed to do and men, or girls and boys. I was a girl who never wanted to wear a dress, and who loved picking up bugs and toads and other animals, and just was not never wanted Barbie dolls, just was not interested in the things that girls are supposed to be interested in.
Yeah.
But yet I didn't fit in with the boys either, or really want to. And so yeah, and then as an adult, my former career, I was a pastor, which some people don't believe women should be allowed to be, and I experienced a lot of gender discrimination in that career. And there are just so many ways that, as you said, we want to put people in boxes, whether it's a gender or a sexual orientation or a political party or anything.
Ethnicity, religion.
Yes.
Look at the many levels of discrimination. I think when you're looking at a catalog for discrimination, there are about over 100 different forms where you can actually feel discriminated.
Yes, and age is another one, which is part of why I started
Age,
doing these, to prove
ableism,
that, we're still
being able-bodied and not, mental health, your eyesight. I have so many, I don't know how they are called in English, Sommersprossen. You need the points I have.
freckles. Yes.
Freckles, yes. I have them all over my body, and I was bullied and mobbed for my freckles.
I just want to quickly acknowledge in the chat, there have been lots of great comments, and we can't go through all of them, but this one about separating ourselves being the root cause of wars, and that fear is our supreme enemy. So true. There's a Bible quote about perfect love cast out fear. That the opposite of faith is not doubt; it's certainty. We put ourselves in boxes, and we're so sure that we're right and that the other person is wrong about an issue or whatever, a person. And so we stay divided, and we argue and try to prove that our box is the right box,
Yeah, there's a very good book about that, The Anatomy of Peace by the Arbinger Institute, that goes exactly into this specific area and explains how it can be actually dissolved. And of course, part of it is in the realm of nonviolent communication. Yet I have found that nonviolent communication is at times a little bit narrow. It is very schematic, and if you're following it strictly, I have found and said, how do I express that? I don't want to. Sometimes you need to.
Yes, sometimes outrage is the appropriate response to injustice, and love
it's not always the appropriate response to sugarcoat and non-violent everything.
I do think there's a way that it can be done in a non-violent way, but it depends on how we define violence. Like for me, I try to distinguish, like when I am very critical of something, a law or a policy or an action, a crime, I try to absolutely condemn that action, that behavior, without resorting to personal insults and name calling and condemning that person as evil. Because even though I can't see any good in them, truthfully, I nevertheless, they are still human. And so we are still connected, even though I might not want to be.
Yeah, sure.
And there's another note in the chat about anger is ultimately compassionate. Because yes, if we just enable people and stay silent and pretend it's okay and only say nice things, we're not doing them any favors either. People need to be held accountable.
No, absolutely not. I think communication is still vastly underrated in healing trauma. Much of my training, actually, in the past 5 years, the first 3 years, the only thing I did was trying to get back my memory because I couldn't remember anything. I was not really working with the memory. Yeah, I was just excavating the memory. And the other part, and the even bigger part, was relearning communication. Because nobody ever taught me how to communicate effectively and how to express myself in a way that is not objectifying, not berating and harmful for other people. And we are taught a form of communication, at least I see it with people my age in Germany. They all talk in the same way. Everybody is talking in the same way. And we're always doing this, instead of
Yes.
reaching us the hands and talking to each other. No, we are talking over each other.
Yes, talking
And
at each other, and we don't know how to listen well. We're always thinking about, how am I going to respond to this? Prove them wrong, or what am I going to say? Instead of just listening and trying to understand and being curious. That doesn't mean we have to agree with them, but just try to understand where they're coming from. Valerie Carr has a wonderful book called "See No Stranger," and she is a Sikh activist whose close friend was the first hate crime murder after 9/11. But yeah, she talks about, true transformation in society and true healing has to include the haters and the people doing the terrible things too. And I think the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in Africa certainly proved that.
absolutely.
And I also think that's why there are so many efforts now, in the US at least, to change the narrative of history and deny historical facts and control what can be taught or discussed or the books that can be read. Because if we acknowledge the harm, it's somehow a threat to the people who have done the harm or whose ancestors have. They don't want to face up to it.
Actually, there's some. I have learned so much about America. Well, I probably never wanted to learn because I'm in connection with Americans, and I get suddenly the behind the scenes.
Yes.
And I'm actually the person. Well, I was looking out from the outside, and I got the L version or the Hollywood version of America presented by government, the superiority complex, the America is great. America is the most modern culture in history. And
yep, the land of the free that everyone wants to come to, the shining beacon on the hill, all of that. Yes.
And
denial
I'm preparing
of reality.
Currently an essay. I haven't written an essay about American politics, but I think I'm now getting there, because America is the only country in the world that has no public health care.
Mm-hmm.
It is the only country in the world that has no paid sick leave, and it is the only country in the world, all totalitarian countries included, that still allows child labor.
Mm.
Child labor for children under 12 is officially allowed in the US if they are working on farms.
In certain states, at least. I don't know if in every state, but I am aware of some states that have recently passed laws to enable that. But at any rate, yeah, the healthcare system. I could talk about how
there are many other things, but that's the three beacons where
yes, and our whole social safety net system is practically non-existent.
Yeah,
absolutely. For those of us that are struggling financially, there's no help. You just lose your house, or you're kicked out of your apartment, or you go hungry. You might be able to get some food from a food bank for a while, but there's so many problems.
They are going to vanish too, because they are no longer getting any money.
Yes, exactly.
Because that's what this regime is looking for.
Yeah, and we have children in Texas that have now died of measles, which was never an issue before because of the misinformation about vaccines now and parents
Yeah.
choosing not to get them. And so these diseases that weren't a problem anymore are becoming problems again, and so many things, yes.
So
But as you said, the solution isn't to say, oh, that side or those people are evil and wrong. It's to say what they're doing is wrong, what they're saying is not true, and we need to um, come together and talk about these things and work together to create a better, kinder world where we do have compassion for everyone and want to be together.
that is one point. And the other point is we all, not just in the US, I say it for my German, in Germany, it isn't all roses as well. Far from it. Currently, it's quite. I don't want to talk about it now because that's a whole other powder keg. But I think we are the more isolated we are,
Mm.
the more we believe in what is true or what we are told is true, what it actually isn't. Because
Yes,
many other countries now are much more modern and have much more social and humane conditions for its citizens than the
absolutely.
USA. And that's actually quite a devastating a point. I haven't wrapped my mind around so far because I'm still in my heart an American. I've ever been since the 80s. And I've never felt for my German country. So um, that is something I have to wrap my head around. I have to say that's a belief where I haven't found a solution yet, and don't know what I'm going to do with it because it 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 tears my heart out
Yes. And
because
many of
it's
us
bleeding
here.
for you all.
Yes. And there are many Americans now who are choosing to relocate to other countries, either because they visit and are exposed for the first time to, hey, there's a better way to live. There's a healthier way where you do
Yeah,
get vacations and paid sick leave and healthcare, and things are less
yeah,
expensive, but at least as much high quality and just a whole different lifestyle that emphasizes rest and family time and just healthier values.
yeah.
And I know so many people that have relocated and
Yeah, or in the process of relocating. My therapist has worked for several years in Washington, D.C.
mhm.
And so she has still a lot of American friends. And she just told me today, 80% of her friends are trying to relocate to Europe now, trying to find their great grandparents having emigrated from Germany or Poland or whatever to somehow find a way to say, okay, basically I'm a German.
Yeah, I
Please
know.
give me a German passport.
Yes, different countries have different residency requirements because I've done some checking too, and it's not financially possible now for my husband and I to relocate. But I am one of so many people that yes, if it were possible for us to leave this country right now, we would. Um,
What
and
have
that's
you
very
checked?
sad.
Because there are countries actually where you don't have to meet any financial requirements.
But I would still have to have the money to move there and the travel costs, the moving costs, the the cost of renting an apartment or buying a home, all of that. So even though if I could get in and become a permanent resident, I can't afford to right now. But yeah, regardless, the point is that, and I have to say, I say that from a position of privilege. Number one, I'm white. Number two, I'm cisgender, heterosexual, and I'm too old to have children. So I am not in the most at-risk, vulnerable groups that are really being targeted and harmed greatly right now. And yet I still am appalled by it so much and disgusted by it that I just want out.
Yeah, I can understand it. Yet if there are, well, you have seen in the past 6 months now, since January, since the first protests on the streets, that the numbers are rising and rising, and I have lived through the fall of the German Wall. And I remember that there were protests in 1989, small protests in Leipzig and in Dresden. Just a few people I think every Friday they met at a special place, and that grew. And I was scheduled for a French intensive course in Montreal, in Canada, starting in the first week of September 1989. And the course went until October 7th. And when I left Germany, if you would have asked me if there will be a unified Germany in the near future, I would have said, never, ever. You're kidding me?
That's a good point. Yeah, it's so easy for me and for many of my friends to kind of lose hope and become cynical and think.
I was in my course, and I was with English Canadian family where I was staying, and I was coming home from my intensive course in Montreal and in the city center, back home to Westmount, and she said, "We are celebrating." I said, "What are we? The hell are we celebrating?" "Yes, we have oysters. Oh, we need to celebrate. Come. What are we going to say?" The wall has fallen. I said, "You're crazy." "No, the wall has fallen." And she said, look here." I was looking at the TV, and I couldn't imagine it. That's only 4 weeks.
Remarkable.
Between several, yes, there were several protests, and there were already these protests in Hungary in the embassy. Nevertheless, I would never have thought that it would happen so quickly. And suddenly, people later told me that in those 4 weeks, suddenly more and more people started to come out, and because so many people were already out on the streets, the masses grew. With every person that was out on the street, 2 more dared to come out as well. And when I came back from Canada, I was feeling like I was in a I don't know. It was like, where am I? It was like a wrong world, because suddenly the border was no longer existent, and all the people suddenly were speaking dialects I didn't understand, and our supermarkets were empty, literally empty. I came home from Canada and I needed to buy some stuff. I couldn't because there was nothing to buy. And that was only 6 weeks. I was away 6 weeks and the whole world had turned on its head in 6 weeks. So never underestimate what people can do, especially if they stay.
Yes. And
Of
also,
course,
I think it's important to say that even if we don't get the change that we hope for, it there's a great story in the U.S. about a man during the Vietnam War who stood outside the White House every day by himself with a candle, like even in the rain, and for a long time to protest the Vietnam War. And he was asked by a reporter, why are you doing this? You're one person. Can't you see that you're not going to change anything? And he said, I'm doing this so it doesn't change me.
Yeah.
I
I've
think
heard
that a lot
about
of the
it.
protests are partly about that, about rediscovering our community when we've all felt isolated and powerless, and realizing that, yeah, even if we don't get the results we want, maybe not even in our whole lifetime, but we could. Nevertheless, it's important for us to model the kindness and the generosity and the coming together and making the world better in whatever way we can.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And of course, those people leaving the US now, they are going to mirror something back to those they left behind and say,
Yes.
hey, I am now in a place you don't believe it. I never thought that is possible, that I could live a life like that. And the more people telling back into the system that they are suddenly living a life they never imagined they could live.
Yes, very important, and I agree. Well, it is almost 3:15 now, and so I try to keep these to about an hour. But I always say, I could talk for at least another hour. I love these conversations, and
no matter, it doesn't matter. It's getting
thank you
dark
so
here.
much for joining me today, and for all that you write on Substack, and being in my Glennon Doyle book club, and just really
looking
enjoying.
forward to Sunday.
Yes.
It was
and
very,
for those who are
very
curious
nice.
about the larger community I mentioned, you'll hear more soon. But on Sunday, August 31st, from 11 to noon Central Time on Zoom, I'm going to be having a free gathering that's just for anyone who is tired of pretending things are fine and wants to have honest conversations and connects with kindred spirits and feel less alone. And ultimately, I'm going to launch an ongoing community, but that gathering will just be open to the public and widely mentioned. So I hope many of you will join that. And it's not too late to join the book club too, which is also free. And like I said, check out the chat on
very much fun.
Yes.
We had a lot of fun, even though we were only a small group. It was very enjoyable to talk about it, and I really enjoyed talking to you tonight. For me, it's already tonight.
I
Sun
have
has
noticed
gone
the
down.
sky get darker as we've talked. Yes.
Yeah, it's getting dark now.
So thank you again, and look forward to seeing you on Sunday too. And thanks to all who have watched us. And check out Jay's Substack. Check out mine if you haven't already, and see if our words resonate with you too. And thanks for being here.
Wishing you all a wonderful day.
Yes.
And a wonderful weekend, because the weekend is just ahead. And thank you very much, Wendy, for this time with. It was very, very kurzweilig. I don't know the English name. It was very enjoyable.
Yes, for me as well. Thank you. And thanks to all who watched us. Bye, everyone.